While Europe was in the Middle Ages, southern Africa was dominated by the Kingdom of Great Zimbabwe. Their kings ruled from a court enclosed by a colossal circular wall, over 25 feet high and 16 feet thick. Little is known about the empire. Even the names of their kings are now forgotten. We do know they owned thousands of head of cattle and provided ivory and gold to Swahili merchants on the East Coast, the first link into Africa's trade network with the world. Today, the country of Zimbabwe takes its name from this ancient kingdom. Zimbabwe means Great House of Stone. Until recently, its real history was denied by white people. They were convinced that black Africans could not have created such monumental structures. For hundreds of years, Europeans dreamed of finding a lost white civilization of incredible wealth somewhere in Africa's dark and savage interior. Karl Mauck, a German explorer, had heard tales of ancient stone ruins in unexplored territory north of the Limpopo River. He searched for months before finally stumbling across these magnificent remains.
Tuesday, 5 September 1871. I saw a short distance away an apparently round edifice. It's built without any mortar of hewn granite slabs. The outer wall is about 150 yards in diameter. The local natives call these ruins Zimbabwe.
Mauck was overcome by the splendor and sophistication of these ruins. But believing black Africans too primitive to build such walls, he was convinced they were the work of a lost white tribe.
Finally, I stopped in front of a tower-like structure. It stood quite undamaged. I learned from the local inhabitants that they themselves have only lived here from about 40 years ago, that the region was quite uninhabited before that time. All are absolutely convinced that white people once inhabited the region.
He drew African artifacts in his notebook, but refused to believe that this city was built by blacks. Finally, he found evidence he believed would prove his theories.
I cut some splinters off the crossbeam. A comparison with the wood of my pencil shows that it must be cedar wood, and this must have come from the Lebanon. Furthermore, only the Phoenicians could have brought it there. Solomon used a lot of cedar wood for the building of his palaces, and these ruins are an imitation of Solomon's buildings in Jerusalem. The great woman who built the enclosure could have been none other than the Queen of Sheba.
This place, according to Mauck, was biblical Ophir, the city of gold. The story of the Queen of Sheba is first told in the Bible. Laden with precious gifts of gold and gems, this mythical white queen visits King Solomon in Jerusalem. She is said to be a temptress, with a lustful body beneath her silken robes. She gives the king everything he desires. Karl Mauck concluded the Queen of Sheba must have been the Queen of Great Zimbabwe, and this place, her palace. Mauck's racist theories were quickly seized upon as valuable propaganda by white settlers seeking to expand the British Empire. Any proof that whites had been here in biblical times would help justify their new exploitation of the region. By the middle of 1890, Cecil Rhodes, a wealthy British industrialist, had founded Rhodesia, a country that remained under white rule until 1980, when the black majority renamed it Zimbabwe. Rhodes carved out for himself thousands of miles of land, rich in diamonds and gold, including the ruins of Great Zimbabwe. Claiming it was a Phoenician palace, he oversaw an orgy of looting that robbed these ruins of their most precious artifacts.
One of the great tragedies of Great Zimbabwe is that people were doing intensive excavation work here in the firm conviction that at the bottom of all this debris was the key to the mystery, the Phoenicians, whoever it was who built it. And of course, once they got down to the bottom and the clearance was complete, they had destroyed all the evidence of all the human habitation that actually went with these walls.
This act of historical vandalism still angers Peter Garlick, once an official in charge of the site. So great was the damage that the true history of this place was almost lost forever. But in 1929, a large-scale expedition of British archaeologists attempted to unlock Great Zimbabwe from the bosom of the Queen of Sheba. Gertrude Caton Thompson, the leader of the group, was determined to solve the riddle of Great Zimbabwe once and for all.
Gertrude Caton Thompson was a formidable woman. Her archaeological standards were of the highest. It was an all-woman team. I think very deliberately she always worked with women and was one of the first feminists in archaeology.
After weeks of digging, her team still hadn't found enough material to date the site. Demoralized, they sought another area worth exploring. Caton Thompson needed to locate unpillaged ruins. A determined explorer, she persuaded a friend to loan her an airplane. As she swept past the back of the Acropolis, she noticed an uncharted path to the top. It was obscured by vegetation and led to a new set of walled enclosures. At last, she had found a place untouched by white hands. The work began the following day. They would eventually collect all the proof she needed. Her conclusion: ancient Bantu people had built Great Zimbabwe in medieval times, starting around the 11th century. But her report was not popular among white Rhodesians.
Gertrude Caton Thompson's work gave her the highest reputation among academics and scientists. It did nothing to persuade the settler to overcome his prejudices. The settler, like all colonial settlers, knew his native. He knew that the native could not do this. He knew that the native was a savage. And nothing that anyone could do, either Caton Thompson or in the 50 years subsequent to her, were going to convince people with such strong racial prejudices that Great Zimbabwe was not exotic.
There are unenlightened persons who assert complacently that these unexampled structures are of Bantu artistry. Bantu people are unchanging. They are as they used to be, farmers, herdsmen of small brain capacity.
She had a special file for such poisonous propaganda. Many years later, a black servant was still shown bowed before a white Queen of Sheba in an official Rhodesian travel poster. Great Zimbabwe was being used as a symbol of white racial superiority. Today, the same image is the icon of the new nation of Zimbabwe.
The attempt was to undermine the legitimacy of the claims of African nationalists and to say this land is as much ours, if not more so, than yours. If you suddenly demonstrate, but look, these walls testify against you, because these have been here for hundreds of years, and they were erected by Africans, silent witnesses that Africans were here centuries before you, they can't take it. So they say the witness is lying. It wasn't built by Africans.